Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, proudly serving as the host of this podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. You can follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. On today's show, on this fine Tuesday, I've got the opportunity to catch up with my good buddy, Josh Cox from Duke Football Talk's Section 17 podcast. We're talking all things Duke men's basketball. Busy week for the Blue Devils. Mark Williams officially declaring for the NBA draft yesterday. The coaching staff starting to come together, recruiting, and a whole lot more coming up on today's show. Without further ado, allow me to bring in my good buddy Josh Cox. As Josh, we talked a lot about football yesterday. People can go now and listen to the Section 17 podcast review from Duke football's spring game. But, buddy, we're switching it over to basketball. We're talking about Jon Scheyer and company.
Yeah, man. It's that time of year, right? That time of year, football, spring practice finishing up, basketball finishing up, banquets, NBA declarations. Who knows what else, right? Who knows what else? Transfer portal declarations, all that. So it's a good time, man. You know, no actual basketball or football going on right now, but it's a great time to talk about it, right?
You've obviously been a Duke fan forever. You love all things Duke and that sort of thing. Does it ever, is it mind-boggling to you, so to speak, that every single year when you look at the calendar, Duke men's basketball in particular, you can find a reason to talk about them at any given point?
Hey, listen, we're the most relevant program in college basketball. And that's arguably, but I believe it. And I believe we're going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. It is what it is. I mean, it's like Yankees baseball. Maybe they don't win every year, but everybody's talking about them. And that's right. The same way it is with Duke basketball. We don't win every year, but people can't stop talking about us. It also helps when basically half of the NBA playoff rosters are full of Blue Devils. And so, you know, at the end of the day, we still have that.
Yeah, no kidding. We saw over the weekend on Sunday an absolutely epic game one between Brooklyn and Boston. Kyrie Irving versus Jason Tatum. Seth Curry is starting for the Brooklyn Nets. I keep thinking about that the whole time. And we had the years of Kyrie and Tatum with the Celtics. There's that photo when they played a training game, a preseason game in the Dean Dome, and they're both wearing their Duke gear together for the Celtics going into it. But boy, oh boy, some of the best players in the league at this point, now that Coach K and Duke officially sort of transitioned to this one and done era, the best players in the league happen to be a part of the Brotherhood in Duke.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not, this is an NBA podcast, but I mean, I think Jason Tatum should finish as a first team All-NBA player this year. We'll see if that happens. If he's not first team All-NBA, I feel like he'll be the sixth guy. I feel like he'll be the number one vote getter on that second team. And honestly, he's still got improvement. Yeah. He's still got ways to improve. That's what's crazy about this guy. He has ways to improve. And then Kyrie, man, people can think what they want to think. I get it. Like, Kyrie's a unique guy. He's probably not your favorite Duke player of all time. But his skill set is unmatched. Yeah. There haven't been many players in the history of the game who have the skill set that he has and the ability to score at will from anywhere on the court. I mean, that shot he hit in the corner with I think it was Jaylen Brown.
Yep.
Had his hand, in his face, and he hit that shot. I mean, what a high-level basketball, man.
When you start to critique Kyrie Irving, too often is the case, you immediately start talking about things that have nothing to do with the ball bouncing on the hardwood. It is 100% Kyrie the person, and we forget about Kyrie the basketball player. Injuries have been a part of that. His vaccine status had been a part of that. But when that guy's on the floor, are you kidding me? He is one of the most gifted, talented players the game, the sport has ever seen. Watching the guy dribble, it's a clinic every single time. And, man, I love the playoffs because we get to be reminded. We said there's no Duke basketball being played right now, but you see those former Duke guys getting a chance to hoop a little bit at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have the guys that just play supporting roles on their teams. You know, you got A guy like Gary Trent, who I think is going to be out, or who was out last night's game. But he's a very important member of the Toronto Raptors, and there are others. I can't obviously go down the list. There are others, but it's really neat to see those guys. Some of them who we knew they had the potential when they were at Duke, but we weren't sure. Gary Trent is a classic one. You knew Gary had the potential, but you weren't quite sure. And there were a lot of Duke fans who were like, he needs another year at Duke. He needs to stay one more year. And, man, he's proved us wrong, right? He's gone to the league. He is a starting two-man in the league. He plays great defense. He shoots 40% from the three-point line. He's everything you'd want in an NBA guard.
Let me get one more NBA deal in here, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about the current state of Duke men's basketball. But we're talking playoffs. We've talked Gary Trent Jr. We've talked about that epic Brooklyn and Boston series. Last week on the show, I went over all 13 players that went to Duke that are now in the NBA playoffs. I want to talk about the number 2 seed in the West. The second best team in the Western Conference is the Memphis Grizzlies, who somehow, some way, went 20-2 in games that Ja Morant was not out on the floor. And that's because Tyus Jones was their backup point guard. And for the 4th straight year, Tyus Jones led the league in assist-to-turnover ratio, setting an NBA record. Never before had a player had the highest assist-to-turnover ratio in 4 consecutive seasons. And Tyus Jones has done that. And without one of the most exciting players in the sport in Ja Morant, his team still went 20-2 when Tyus Jones was the starting point guard.
So I follow NBA basketball fairly closely. And there are voters for the MVP and the first team All-NBA teams who basically what they're saying in a nutshell is because of how good Tyus Jones is, it is making Ja Morant. It is actually a little bit of a clip off of him. Like,
sure.
How could they be that good when he's not there? Like, how valuable really is he? And my argument there, that should take nothing away from Ja Morant. Ja Morant is still one of the top 5, 6, 7 players in the league, and he should be in the MVP conversation. What it's saying is, and this is what people are not saying, is that Tyus Jones is an incredible basketball player. He ought to be a starting guard in the league. Before the Celtics went on their incredible run to close the season out, there was a lot of talk of were they going to put Marcus Smart on the trading block. He wasn't the true point guard and all those things. And nobody mentioned this, but I'm thinking, man, Tyus Jones on that Boston Celtics team would be absolutely unstoppable, getting the ball to those wings. But anyway, doesn't need to happen right now. Marcus Smart's playing great. But, yeah, you're right. Tyus Jones and Trey not far behind him. Not far behind them. Both of those guys are I believe they're going to be in the league for as long as they want to be in the league.
Yeah, they're so good. The Jones brothers. Trey finished 2nd in assist-to-turnover ratio. And you're older. I mean, the younger brother, I feel like they're always kind of getting the snot, and your older brother is the only reason that you're not the league leader in that assist-to-turnover department. Kind of fun. Let's talk about Duke men's basketball currently with Josh Cox in just a moment when we return here on Locked On Blue Devils. Our show today is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. JJ Jackson here on Locked On Blue Devils with Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. He's on Twitter at Joshua Cox, and check out the show at Duke FB Talk to interact with them. They're over at Section 17. Their podcast is now available to recap the spring game. All right, let's talk basketball. Last week, I did a couple of end-of-season reviews for the Duke men's basketball team. We saw the banquet take place. And in terms of the roster, as we're doing this on our Tuesday, April 19th edition of Locked On Blue Devils, we have learned now, Josh, that Joey Baker is going to come back and play another year for Duke basketball. He had a hip surgery that not too many people knew about was happening or anything. And then all of a sudden he shows up to the banquet on crutches. The next day, Duke makes the announcement that that's what happened. He's making a full recovery, and he's going to use his COVID year. What does it mean Joey Baker's coming back for another year?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a 22, 23-year-old man on the roster as opposed to an 18 or 19-year-old kid on the roster, right? And Joey's got his limitations. We know that. But at the end of the day, can you have if you can have a fifth-year guy stay around, I don't care what his limitations are. He's going to bring something to that locker room that you can't replicate. And so I personally am happy for Joey. Just to be honest with you, I'd have been very disappointed if this had not happened. The way that it went down, the way he didn't have a senior day, all those things, I'm thinking to myself, man, there's got to be something in the works. And then when he wasn't playing at all, for the last few games of the season, I'm thinking, I understand we whittle the bench down a little bit as we get closer to the end. But, man, Joey could have come in sometime, maybe given us a boost. Well, now we know. And so I was just relieved. I think it's going to be good. Returning team captain, I'll take that any day of the week. And by the way, Duke fans need to appreciate it too. I know Joey's got his limitations. We get it. We understand he's not going to be an elite defender. But, man, we gripe and complain about not getting to know guys and guys not staying. So when they do stay, we better show them love and respect, man.
No doubt about it. I'm glad you said that. I had thought about that in the past before, but that is exactly true. Be excited about the fact that Joey is taking this opportunity to come back. He's an experienced guy. When these one-and-done teams for Duke have fallen short a little bit, you've heard Duke fans start to say, well, if there was a little bit more experience or that sort of thing, or leadership. And leadership doesn't always have to be production. That's one of Coach K's number one talking points, is that your on-court production doesn't have to make you a leader. You could still be a leader and not play as much. And so for Baker to come back, the shooter that he's going to be, I think he's a great guy to have for somebody like Jaden Shute, who's not one of the heralded recruits coming in, but is going to be an absolute bucket and shooter at the next level. So thrilled he's a part of that Duke recruiting class. What we also learned yesterday, Mark Williams got to team up with the ever-incredible Duke men's basketball social team and release a video thanking Duke, claiming himself to be a Blue Devil forever. But after 2 seasons and as the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, a finalist for the National Defensive Player of the Year award, Mark Williams, a projected lottery pick, has officially declared for the 2022 NBA draft.
Think back 2.5 years ago. I remember I followed basketball recruiting a little bit more than football recruiting. And I just remember guys talking about all of Mark's limitations. Hey, don't be so high on Mark Williams. He has so many limitations. And, man, my guy came in, and obviously at the end of last season, could have gone pro at the end of last season with the stretch that he had there. But then this year, and here's the thing, Mark took a chance by coming back because he rode that 7 or 8 game wave at the end of last season.
Right.
And then our season got abruptly ended. And he could have very easily said, listen, I'm probably a late first round, early second round guy. I'm going to go while I know I can. But he came back. And he ran the risk of coming back. And honestly, there's a number of things that could happen. Injuries, God forbid. But you could play behind people. Theo John could have come in and really looked special, and Mark wouldn't have even started, So he took a risk. But in taking that risk, Mark came back and showed people that last stretch of his freshman season was not a fluke. He is the real deal. Once he figures out positioning, once he bulks up a little bit, once he's given the freedom to shoot the ball a little bit more, I think this guy's going to be a great NBA player. He's going to have a long career. Who doesn't want a 7'1" guy with a 7'7" wingspan who can also shoot a jumper? Who doesn't want that guy? Everybody, every team in the NBA wants a guy like that.
No kidding. And now they're going to get the opportunity to draft him. He has climbed up draft boards and that sort of thing. Mark Williams declaring for the draft. Quote released from Coach K, quote, "Mark was a joy to coach. This is such a special moment for him and his incredible family, and we will miss having the Williamses in our program. Mark was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year and one of the best shot blockers in the country, but that doesn't tell the entire story about the type of player he is. He is gifted at both ends of the floor and is driven to get better every day. The NBA team that drafts Mark is obviously getting a talented player, but an equally impressive young man off the court that will represent their organization with class. I cannot wait to watch him at the next level." End quote. That coming from Mike Krzyzewski. His sister Elizabeth has her jersey retired in the rafters at Cameron Indoor after a standout career for the Duke women's basketball program. There equally could have been more pressure on Mark to have a great career because your sister did so well in that same building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he lived up to it.
He did. He more than lived up to it, in my opinion. More than lived up to it. And I think what was neat was to watch his sister become like his biggest cheerleader throughout the season and watch her on Twitter and social media and the way she interacted about what he was doing. And I love that. And yeah, there are certain kids you just get this vibe from. They're just good people. They're good people. You get that vibe from her. You get that vibe from Mark. And I couldn't be happier for a kid coming into Duke, exceeding expectations from his recruiting and just turning out to be an incredible ball player.
All right, let's get ready to talk about Duke men's basketball, the current state of the program, and what's next for John Shire in just a moment. Before we do that, we've got time now for a big announcement here with the Locked On Podcast Network as we get you set for the NFL Draft starting April 28th. Tune into the Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Lodyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special, hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of Peacock and Williamson's NFL show all week leading up to the first pick. Moving forward here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson hanging out with Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. All right, we've got more decisions that need to be made. The longer it goes, there's a clock that's ticking now. We're about a week away, April 25th, from when decisions for early entrants have to be made. They can still come back after that deadline, but you got to announce here in the next 6 or 7 days. There's more and more momentum about the likes of Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore Jr. potentially coming back in Durham. Are you kind of sensing that, Josh, or where do you stand? Do you think ultimately the decisions have already been made?
Yeah, well, a couple of Twitter shout-outs here to people who I feel like are in the know. One of them is that Duke NBA at Duke NBA. It's Zion.
Yes.
I don't know his last name. He's very well connected to the program. He has been right on numerous occasions about many things. And he has been dropping that hint now for about a week and a half that I think Duke fans are going to be happy, right? And so that's all he'll say at this point, and I respect that. But just earlier last night, Brendan Marks has also floated out there that there's one less announcement that'll be made about going to the pros for Duke. And he's actually mentioned that he's got an article preparing an article. So I don't know if he already knows who it is. It's obviously between Wendell and Trevor. And I'm interested to know your opinion as well. Which one of those guys? Obviously, both would be. I mean, we'd be doing backflips. And now that you guys can see me on YouTube, if I did a backflip, that'd be incredible. But if those two came back, I would do one. I believe it's gonna be one of those two. JJ, I'd love your thoughts. Actually, I'm reversing the roles here.
Yeah, let's do that.
If you had to say Wendell Moore or Trevor Keels, this is not a knock against either one of those guys. If you had to say one of the two comes back next year, which one is it?
Yeah, I talked about this on one of the shows 2 weeks ago with Ryan Lohman, the Duke Nation Twitter account out there, and was asking about the better NBA careers of the two guys. Who's out there? Who is it? With Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore. And the more I think about it, the more confused I get, Josh, honestly, because I feel like I change the answer every day. There's one way to look at it with Wendell Moore Jr. in that you've been at Duke for 3 years. Can your stock really elevate? or is now the time to move forward? And we saw the heavy workload on Wendell as the year went along. I think he kind of tailed off a little bit in some departments. I think some of that could be that Jeremy Roach really asserted himself in that point guard spot, and Wendell tailed off a good bit. But Trevor, the same way. I think that at times it looked like Trevor Keels offensively wasn't as productive as you would have liked for him to be. What I keep coming back to, though, and I think it was Brendan Marks, even of The Athletic, who really brought this to my attention, is the fact that Wendell is only a few months older than Paulo Banchero. Like, I that needs to be said again. Wendell Moore Jr. is only a few months older than Paulo Banchero. And so when you're thinking about 3 years in college versus 1, instantly, okay, that guy needs to go. He's been here 3 years. But from an age perspective and what a team is looking at, I don't know that it really is that big of an issue. For Duke going into next year, the 2-guard spot seems to be more of an uncertainty. And I just think Trevor Keels, again, is going to have the better NBA career. I think he's the better basketball player. So I think the progression with him being the guy offensively going into the year next year, I think I'd be more excited from him. But I can't do backflips either. I've torn the ACL twice already in my lifetime. It'd probably happen a third time if I tried to. But if either one of those guys comes back, I'm attempting it. And if both guys come back for Duke, we're going to have to live stream us doing cartwheels together, Josh. We're going to make it happen.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. Yeah. So here's my quick thoughts. I don't think Wendell's draft stock is going to get any higher by coming back. Okay. Number one. But if he does come back, he will go down in Duke history. A 4-year guy, a champion, not a national champion yet, but gone to the Final Four, ACC champion, and a 4-year guy.
Got the Dr. J award this year for the best small forward in the country.
And you mentioned Joey Baker. Sometimes leadership is not necessarily on the court, but Wendell, his leadership is on the court, and that's important as well. So I think for Wendell's sake, he probably needs to go pro. For Trevor's sake, listen, here's a guy who comes in as a shooting guard, a 2-man, and he shot 30% from the three-point line. He will be a second-round pick or a late first-rounder. I don't care what the mock drafts are saying right now. He's not going to go mid-first round. If he goes first round,
they're just going to look at the numbers. Yeah.
Correct. And they're going to say, hey, he might be able to shoot, but he didn't do it all year at Duke. And so, I think he does stand. He could very similar to Mark Williams, obviously different positions, but he could come back and say, hey, those last couple games you saw me play in the tournament, that's who I really am. And I'm going to come back next year and show you that. And so I would love to see that. I agree with you. Dariq Whitehead did not come to Duke to sit on the bench. So he will be starting and playing. I think it makes a lot more sense for Trevor Keels to stay than it does Wendell Moore. But, hey, I'm going to be happy with either one of them.
So our last thought here, Trevor Keels comes back. Roach, Keels, Whitehead, Filipowski, Lively, is that sort of the first 5 that you're envisioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then obviously we are going to be in the transfer portal.
Right.
I mean, we're going to be. I mean, there's the kid from Kansas State. That's we're down in his final 2 or 3, whatever it is. Kid from SMU. Both of those are like point guards.
Right.
So I could definitely see us running a little bit of that 2015 Jeremy Roach as Quinn Cook and whoever else is Tyus Jones. Right. I could see us running that 2-point guard look. We'll see. That'll be something that you could definitely talk about on Locked On Blue Devils for sure. If that happens, we could put together a national title run team.
The five that I just listed had 5-star Mark Mitchell coming off the bench. That's just where Duke is at right now. And then again, Jaden Shute, who I'm a big fan of. I think he's going to be great. So awesome stuff. Josh, I appreciate it as always. Give me one final plug for the Section 17 podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Go wherever you find podcasts. Just search Section 17 podcast. You'll see us come up there, Duke Football Talk. We just released a new episode about spring practice and the spring game, kind of where we see the program. We do a deep dive on all that stuff. Give us a 5-star rating and review. Do the same thing right now for Locked On Blue Devils. We appreciate it. It helps both of our podcasts to grow if you will do that. So if you enjoy this content, if you enjoy the content at Section 17, help us out. It's simple. It's quick. but leave us a rating and review. We'd appreciate it.
Josh, I appreciate it as always. I look forward to talking to you again soon, okay?
All right, man. Have a great one. We'll see you, JJ.
All right, that's Josh Cox from Duke Football Talk Section 17 podcast, and that wraps up another edition here of Locked On Blue Devils. Again, thanks so much to my buddy Josh for stopping by. Check out Section 17. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.